high school diploma. Drones are replacing delivery men. 3D printers are replacing assembly line manufacturing workers. Robots are replacing retail and restaurant workers. And pretty soon, driverless cars will replace bus drivers and truck drivers and even Uber drivers. In fact, according to a recent study by McKinsey last year, 60% of all jobs could experience some form of automation using today's technology, not some far-off technological advance. That will mean clearly fewer jobs will be created, and it also means today that there's a suppression of wages because the jobs that exist will have to be accommodated to this big change. At the same time, the innovation economy is creating millions of new jobs, ones that can't be replaced by technology, but require higher levels of skill and some degree of humanity. Last year, and this has been a chronic problem over the last 4 or 5 years, nearly 6 million jobs remained vacant because employers couldn't find qualified workers. As innovation continues to transform the economy, the gap between jobs and skills will continue to grow. That brings me to my second lesson. The global economy is evolving at warp speed and a rapid pace of change that is far outpacing the adoption and implementation of education reform. Think about it. In the 10 years since our first summit, Apple has released 13 versions of the iPhone, and so has Samsung. 13 versions in 10 years. By comparison, our education system, even with the progress, again, that you all have made, virtually remains the same as it was 50 years ago, and even 100 years ago in some ways. By comparison, now. Look, this is probably the place in the speech where it's important to say the political arguments we have back home, because we do. Governor Haslam's got tar marks on his forehead for the fights. I do too. The scars are kind of finally going away. You all have those for sure, for fighting the good fight. But what we need to do is get beyond that and recognize whether you think our schools are great, and some people do, or whether you think our schools are failing our kids, we need to put that aside for a brief moment and recognize they have to get better and they have to change to the world we're moving towards. It's like a quarterback throwing into the end zone. You don't throw it to where the receiver is, you throw it to where the receiver will be. And that's exactly what we have to do in education, and perhaps rebuild the coalition of the willing to make transformational change happen. The third lesson is that innovation begets innovation. We see that each and every day. And reform works the same way. Reform fosters reform. The past has proven that success is never final, reform is never finished, and we need to encourage ourselves, those in the political arena and those that are trying to support people in the political arena, to not check the box and say, well, I got that done, now I can go work on my child welfare system or change committees to get to another place, work on road building, whatever. All those things are important. But education reform requires constant attention, because if you're not moving forward, atrophy sets in and you begin to push back. Finally, the last thing, the thing that hasn't changed in the last 10 years, in fact 20 years or 30 years, is the teachers union. Entrenched special interests continue to focus on the adults of an outdated system and impose choice and innovation and accountability. But don't get me wrong, they're doing their job, if you think about it. Their job is to organize for the economic interests of the adults in the system. We shouldn't be angry about that, we should recognize that that's their job. But that doesn't mean we should not push back when it hurts children for their economic interests to be attained at the expense of kids not learning. We need to be on the side of families. It's a huge opportunity. My hope is that we find new coalitions of the willing to embrace the challenge in a way that will make sure that students succeed. To win this race against time, we need to tackle the knowledge gap epidemic, because it truly is one, which is widespread disparity between kids, what they need to know and what they actually know. And by the way, this is not just about kids in poverty. This is about our children. The gaps that exist are real. According to the nation's report card, more than 60% of fourth graders can't read or do math at grade level, at proficiency. Nearly 50% of those students are performing below grade level, come from high-income families. Reading and math proficiency can no longer be dismissed as a problem of low-income students. This is important because reading independently, as we know in 4th grade, is the first step to a purposeful life. According to the research of the